All right, welcome to our next installment of distance learning for Pam. We talked about budgeting, balancing income and expenses, those kind of things. Today we are going to move into credit. What is credit? How does it work? And we'll explore just the ins and outs of credit using some handouts and readings as a guide. These are things that we would have worked on in class, and I'm just going to take us through them. So we're going to start here with a scenario. Chris wanted to buy a new sound system for her truck. When she went to Super Stereo Warehouse to check out how much a system with HD radio was going to cost, she realized that the total price of the system with installation was going to be $200 more than what she had saved. Chris was able to save $400 from the money she had received from graduating from high school and working part-time. The salesperson at the stereo shop told her that she can charge the rest on a credit card. Chris went home to think about it. Her brother told her that it was a good idea, but Chris didn't have a credit card. She didn't even know how to get credit. So we'll continue kind of reading about that and thinking through it in a minute. I'm going to talk about some of these things over here on the left, and then I'm going to read through these questions. We're not going to fill these out, but I'm going to read through them, and I want you to kind of think about them, and then we'll talk about them in a little while. So it's no secret using a credit card will cost you money. You will have to pay interest on your credit balance and may have to pay an annual fee for a credit card. Also, most companies will charge you extra for late payments and if you spend more than your credit limit. So what is credit? Credit is the opportunity to get something now and pay for it later. How you use credit is tracked by a credit reporting agency. The file they complete on you, your credit report, will determine whether you get credit and the interest rate you will be charged for credit. Credit comes from, I believe it's Latin, credo, which means to believe. If you think about the word creed, like to have a creed or to say a creed is to state beliefs. And so credit means I believe that you will pay me back. You are creditable. If you have credit, it means that you can trust in someone. There's an element of trust. So credit cards and having credit and your credit score kind of shows how responsible you are with, you're kind of proving with your credit score how reliable you can be in terms of paying back what you have borrowed. So let's talk through these questions and then we'll move on. Do you think that you might like to buy a car or go to college or take a trip far away? If so, right now is the time to be considering the ins and outs of credit. Most people will need some type of credit to reach their life goals. Take the following credit facts and fiction quiz to see how much you already know about credit. So I'm going to read through these, but we're not going to answer them. Just think about to yourself, is this fact or fiction? What do you think? As a high school student working at your first job, you will have probably built a credit history. So fact or fiction for number 1. Number 2, taking out a loan is a good idea because it will give you the money you need to buy what you want right now. Fact or fiction? You must be 18 years old to obtain credit in your own name. If you are using credit, you are actually using someone else's money. Credit usually costs you money. You will have to sign a legally binding contract to use credit. So we're thinking fact or fiction here. It is illegal to be denied credit because of your sex or race. It is important to have a good credit history because employers and landlords may use your credit history when deciding whether to hire or rent to you. All financial institutions charge the same interest and offer the same types of credit. Your credit report contains personal information about your behavior obtained from your neighbors. Okay, so fact or fiction on those. We'll come back to explaining those out. Let's talk about obtaining credit. How do you get credit? When you first apply for credit, the one question all lending institutions will try to answer is, are you creditworthy? They decide if you are creditworthy based on your ability to meet your financial obligations, your savings and assets, your employment history, and your past financial history. While you cannot receive credit in your own name until you are 18 years old, it is a good idea to start proving your financial responsibility before applying for credit. Remember that building creditworthiness is a process that takes years. By starting now, you will be able to get credit when you need it. The Keys to Building Credit graphic is a good guide to building your credit foundation. Remember, the sooner you pay off your balance, the less you will have to pay. All right, so here are our keys to building credit. If these steps don't work, consider asking a responsible relative with a good credit history to co-sign a credit application with you. After a year of making payments, ask the creditor to transfer the account into your name only. So this is one way that you could build credit, is by having what's called a co-signer. And that's someone kind of vouching for you. They're saying, look, this person doesn't have credit history. They're not creditable yet based on their own kind of demonstration. But they are willing to co-sign, which means they also put their name on the credit to vouch for you. And if you don't pay, not only are you responsible, but they will also come after, and it will affect the credit score of the person who co-signs with you. So that's why it's talking about a responsible relative or something like that. Be careful who you have co-sign with you. Even more importantly, down the line, be careful who you co-sign for. Do not co-sign for people, lightly, because it will affect you. All right, let's talk about the keys to building credit. Here's our first one here. Open a checking or savings account to learn the responsibility and prove your ability to pay bills. So opening a checking or savings account. A checking account and a debit card are very different than a credit card. A debit card is actually just a method of using the money that you already have in your account to pay for things. So that's your debit card. A credit card is using money that you are allowed to be loaned, whatever that amount is. You can use that money that you don't have to buy things, and then you pay back that money with interest. So that's credit. If you have a checking account, a debit card, that's paying from your own money, from your own account, without borrowing it. Step 2, apply for a secured credit card with your bank. You can once you have your checking account and your bank sees that you're maintaining it, you're not overdrafting, you can apply for a credit card through your bank. Then use that credit card to buy something on time from a major store. So buy something and pay on time from a major store. So personally, my first credit building experience was my mom co-signed with me at Best Buy for a Best Buy credit card to buy a laptop. And then I made payments and paid it off myself. So I bought one thing and then made payments on it and paid it off. And that started me down the road of building credit history. So you can buy something and then just pay it back on time. The other thing that you can do is borrow against the money you have in a savings account. So let's say you have $500 in your savings account and you are going to buy something that costs $200 with your credit card. Pay it on the credit card, but then immediately, take the money out of your savings account you've already saved up for it and pay the bill off on time. And then instead of repaying the credit card, repay it back into your savings account. When a lending institution or company decides to give you credit, they will require you to sign a legally binding contract. This contract will provide all of the details of your agreement. Items that may be found in your contract include the amount that they've loaned you, the amount of down payment you give, and the remaining balance, the amount of the finance charge, the percentage of interest, the annual percentage rate, any other charges, the number, dollar amount, due dates of payments, the charge for a late payment, the description of collateral held by a lending institution, maybe something like a car, things that they may be able to take if you do not pay the loan. And then if you do not like the details of agreement, you don't have to sign it. Someone with a good credit history should help you look it over. However, once you sign the contract, you are legally obligated to fulfill it. So you don't have to get a credit card. There's nothing that says you have to get a credit card or a loan. But so you can just walk away. But if you do sign it, you are legally obligated to fulfill your financial responsibilities. And there are different kinds of credit. We'll talk more about loans. Right now, we're kind of leaning just into credit cards themselves. So just as important as building credit worthiness is keeping it. So by maintaining a good credit history, you will be able to get money when you really need it, to buy a car, finance a house, or in case of emergency. But if you don't maintain a good credit history, have a hard time renting an apartment or getting a job or establishing a telephone. Yeah, even like cell phone companies will check your credit. Even scarier, a bad credit history can follow you for 7 to 10 years. So here are some tips. Create a realistic budget and stick to it. Use the money that you have and budget the money that you have. Have as few credit cards and loans as possible so you won't forget how much you owe. Also, lending institutions don't like to see your money spread too thin. If you have too many loans, you may not be able to get another. Pay off more than the minimum payment. A lot of times, the minimum payment doesn't cover what you've borrowed. It only covers your interest. So you can make a $25 minimum payment on $100 loan or $100 bill, but it might only be going toward the interest. So let's say you have $100 on your credit card and you're paying a minimum payment of $20 every month. In theory, it should take you about 5 months to pay back that $100, right? 20 times 5, 100. But you're charged for borrowing the money in the first place, and a lot of times your minimum payment only covers the charge for borrowing the money. It doesn't actually go to paying back the money that you borrowed. And so you could pay $20 every month for the next year and still owe money for the $100 that you used on the credit card. It's a very, very, very dangerous thing. So be very careful about the minimum payments. Comparison shop for credit and obtain only the credit you need. You get them in the mail all the time as you get older. Credit card offers, you've been pre-approved, all these different things. Comparison shop and just get credit for what you need. Don't get a lot of extra because you will be tempted to use it and you can get yourself in trouble that way. Keep track of what you owe so you won't have more debt than you realize. And then contact your lending institution immediately if you realize you're having problems making payments. They may be able to work out a modified payment plan. Even better, don't get a loan that you're not sure that you can pay. The most important thing you can do to build a good credit report is to pay your bills on time. And just a little note about that. If you miss a payment, sometimes they will give you a penalty interest rate. They increase your interest rate for not being creditable. And sometimes they can take that increased interest rate and apply it to previous payments. So not just on the amount that you owe, but on the total amount that you borrowed. And it can end up being hundreds of dollars. So let's talk about this sound system real quick. So how did you learn about credit? Chris said she talked to her mom. She told her that credit is a promise to pay something back to a creditor that loans you money. And that because she was just starting out, she should establish credit by getting a gas card or store credit card instead of, like a general Visa or whatever. The first thing she did, she got a card with a gas station and has been making payments regularly on it to establish her credit. She pays the bill off on time for the last 6 months. Think about it like this. You're going to have to pay for gas anyway. So if you get a gas credit card and you've budgeted that in, you use that card, but you've already designated money from your account to pay that off so that you can build credit. And then, did you ever get a new sound system? She says she's thinking about moving out of her house, out of her mom's house, and into an apartment with some friends, and using the money she was going to use for the new sound system on that. Now that she has established credit, she hopes that her apartment manager will see that she can pay her bills on time and rent her an apartment. Just something here. We like to use credit for the stuff that we have convinced ourselves we want or need. And sometimes just not being able to buy it and waiting, you realize that you didn't really need it or want it that bad in the first place. If you're denied credit, what if you do everything you do to build your credit worthiness and you're still denied? Sometimes you just need persistence. You can try different institutions. You can try local businesses and then try again later. It depends on what you're borrowing, where you're borrowing from. A lot of times you're not denied credit, but your interest rate is what fluctuates. So if you have really poor credit, or if you're higher risk or less creditable for lending money, they just charge you more for that money. You can look at your credit report, which lending institutions, employers, and landlords access to view your credit history. This report contains identification and employment information, payment histories, a record of who has accessed your report, and public record information. So if it's been accessed a lot, if other people are checking out your report a lot, that can work against you because it means that you are looking for other loans, some of those things. And you have to be careful about it. Check your credit report for inaccuracies, which may have affected your ability to get credit. And then look to see if there is any accurate negative information. If you made a mistake before, you can start to fix it now. But the idea is you're better off to start doing this well than to kind of go into it, screw it all up, and then try to fix it down the line. Credit is a necessary evil. Our world kind of revolves around it. It's hard to do much without having credit. But essentially, it's a really, really, really dangerous practice with money. It's a really dangerous thing, way to use money. And it can get a lot of people into trouble really quick. So the more cautious you are starting, the better off you'll be down the line. And that's kind of a question that you should consider. Should you even have credit? Now, again, the world kind of revolves around it. I had a roommate many years ago, and I had built my credit, but he didn't have any credit. And so we were able to get an apartment, but then we ended up moving, and he had a hard time finding an apartment because he didn't have a credit history. And that was because he saved up and bought everything in cash. He didn't have any debt. He didn't want any debt. And so even though he did the right thing, a more financially responsible thing by not having a credit card and not having any debt, he wasn't able to prove that he could pay back his debt. There's no actual proof that he is creditable, even though, he was paying for everything upright and saving for things. So you do kind of have to balance that. A lot of people use it poorly and they find themselves in financial troubles, and it can really follow you, especially if you have too many credit cards or lines of credit. It's important to keep track of spending and know how much debt you can handle to avoid spending more money than you realize. If you are not ready for credit, saving for purchases can help you learn to track your money. Okay, so here are the answers to the credit facts and fiction. I'm going to read through this kind of quickly so that we can move on. If you are in high school or working at your first job, you will probably find it hard to get credit. It takes a long time to build credit history, especially a good one. But we kind of read about how to start that already. If you get credit to buy everything you want now, you'll be shocked when it is time to pay back that credit and might even find yourself in financial trouble. We read through maintaining good credit history to kind of talk about that, or maintaining good credit. Until you're 18 years old, you cannot enter into a contractual agreement. In other words, you can't get credit in your own name. When a lending institution gives you credit, they are letting you borrow their money. You are expected to pay it back plus interest or a fee. The lending institution that gives you credit is running a business, which means they are making money. They make money by charging you a fee or interest to use their money. To make sure you pay back all the money you borrow, your lending institution will require you to sign a legally binding contract. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act prohibits discrimination against sex or race. While not everyone can obtain a copy of your credit history, employers and landlords can. They often use it to determine your character and your likeliness to pay your rent or act responsibly at a job. So credit goes a lot further than just, what you're spending money on and kind of personal. It can affect employment and living situation. Charges for credit and credit offers vary among financial institutions. It's a good idea to speak with various institutions to find the best credit option for you. Personally, I bought my truck and I had to get a loan. And if I were to get a loan through a dealership, sometimes they give you lots of incentives to buy, or like they'll take money off of the car that you're buying if you do a loan through them. But a lot of times their interest rates are a lot higher than if you go to a financial institution. Like I went to a local credit union and got a loan for a much lower interest rate than I could have gotten at the dealership. So it is important to shop around. And your credit report contains identification and employment information, payment history, a record of who has requested your report, and public record information. Credit reporting agents are not permitted to include gossip in your report. That was the question about your neighbors. So things that you may need credit for, I'm just going to kind of talk through these. Some things you may need credit for. Big purchases. You might need credit for like larger purchases, things that you need right away that you might not be able to save up for. Maybe emergencies, maybe traveling, some of those things. But again, really the most important thing you need credit for is to build your credit score, to build your credit history, because employers, apartments, if you're getting a loan, like a large loan, a home loan, a mortgage, those kind of things, they check your credit. And then what is credit? That is, how creditable you are. It's borrowing money at with an agreement to pay it back and some terms. So some things you can do to prepare yourself for credit. You can actually, this one I'm going to post a question. What are some things you can do to prepare yourself for obtaining credit? You please list like 3 things. Okay. What is the most important thing you can do to avoid trouble with credit? I'm going to ask this question of you as well. What can you do to avoid trouble with credit? How much credit should you use? I'm not going to ask a question for this one, but it should be whatever you can pay back. Don't use more credit than you can manage. And then how long will a bankruptcy stay on your credit report? I don't remember off the top of my head as I'm talking through this, but I believe it's 7 to 10 years, something like that. Okay, and then here's a credit quiz. I'm not going to stop and ask you questions on all of these, but these are questions it's important to ask of yourself first. So are you willing to repay the loan? Don't get a loan if you're not willing to repay it. And if it doesn't fit in your budget, then don't get don't get a loan. Have you used credit before? It's an important question. Do you pay your bills on time? If you have a hard time paying your bills on time, probably not a good idea to borrow more money. Do you live within your means? Okay, some capacity questions. If you get a loan, can you afford to repay it? It's an important question. Do you have a job, consistent income? If you get a loan and you have to pay a fixed amount every month, but you don't know where that money's coming from every month, or it's not steady, probably not a great idea to use credit for purchases. Have you worked longer than 1 year? This talks about just kind of longevity and consistency. And do you plan to go to or complete college? All right, a few more questions here and we're going to call it a video. So do you own a car or home? These are capital. Capital is like what the things that you have. Do you own a car or home? If you do, then those things can be used against you should you not pay back the loan that you made. So they can take stuff from that. Do you own other items that can be used as collateral? So think about collateral, like sometimes we ask you to put your cell phone or your ID card before you grab a calculator. That's collateral. It's to ensure us that we're going to get back what you borrowed. So do you have other items that can be used as collateral? Do you have a savings or checking account that you contribute to regularly? Does your take-home pay cover all of your monthly expenses? Again, a budget is really, really, really important to have in place before you start considering credit. Do you own more than you owe? Do you own more than you owe? Are your monthly payments towards debt less than 15% of your take-home pay? This again, you would be able to calculate this out of a budget. And then are your possessions mostly paid for? And then yes, on most of these boxes, in this age range, 18 to 20, you will probably be ready to apply for credit. If a lot of these boxes were no for you, or a lot of these questions were no, you'll still need some work on developing your credit history. And we're not going to do the scenarios. So the whole idea here is, again, just kind of understanding yourself. We'll look at how to read a credit card statement and a Schumer box and some of those things in the future. But for today, just really wanted to focus on, do you kind of understand yourself and how kind of an overview of how credit works, what it is. It's borrowing money and paying back extra as you pay it back. So we'll continue talking about credit for the next few lessons, and hopefully you will learn a lot more and be responsible humans now and in the future. All right, take care. Bye-bye.